The transport ship slowed as it approached the massive space station. Nari pressed her face against the small window and stared at the structure floating in the darkness. The Galactic Defense Academy was bigger than anything she had ever seen. It stretched across space like a metal city, with towers and domes connected by long bridges. Bright lights flickered from thousands of windows. Ships moved in and out of docking bays like busy insects. "First time seeing it?" asked Park Ji-ho from the seat beside her. He was looking out another window, his dark eyes wide with amazement. "Yes," Nari replied. "It is much larger than the picture showed us." Behind them, Lee Soo was reading from his datapad again. He had been studying information about the Academy for weeks. "It says here that over 50 different species attend the Academy. The station can hold 20,000 cadets at one time." 20,000, whispered Yoon. "Rena." She sat across the narrow aisle with Choi, Dana, and Han Byom. All 6 humans looked small in the transport, designed for larger alien bodies. The seats were too big and the ceiling too high. Even the air felt different, thinner than what they were used to on Earth. The docking process took 30 minutes. Their transport was directed to a small bay on the outer ring of the station. Through the windows, they could see much larger ships docking in the central bays. Some were so big that their transport could have fit inside their cargo holds. "Attention, human passengers," came a voice through the communication system. The translator made it sound flat and emotionless. "Prepare for station entry. Follow all posted signs to Processing Center 7. Do not deviate from marked paths." The airlock opened with a soft hiss. Cool air rushed into the transport, carrying strange smells. Nari stepped onto the docking platform and felt the artificial gravity pull at her feet. It was slightly heavier than Earth normal, making each step require more effort. The processing center was a large room filled with desks and scanning equipment. Dozens of different aliens moved through lines, getting their documents checked and receiving room assignments. Nari had studied pictures of various species, but seeing them in person was overwhelming. A group of tall reptilian beings stood near the center desk. Their scales were dark green and black, and they moved with smooth confidence. These had to be Vaxari. Their leader wore a uniform with many decorations and spoke in sharp, commanding tones to the smaller beings around him. "Look at those crystals," Dana whispered, pointing to another group. The Nethek beings looked like walking gemstones, their bodies reflecting light in beautiful patterns. They communicated by changing colors, their surfaces shifting from blue to purple to gold. The third major group was harder to see clearly. The plume beings appeared as shifting clouds of gas held together by some kind of energy field. They wore special suits that contained their gaseous forms with transparent helmets showing swirling colors inside. "Humans to Desk 7, called a mechanical voice. The 6 Earth natives walked through the crowd, drawing stares from every direction. Most of the aliens had never seen humans before. Some pointed at them and spoke in their native languages. The translations came through as whispers about the mammals from the edge worlds and the new primitives. The processing clerk was a small being with 4 arms and large compound eyes. It scanned their documents quickly and handed them each a datapad. "Room assignments and class schedules," it said without looking up. "Orientation begins in 2 hours. Do not be late." Their rooms were located in Section D, Level 15. The corridor was long and narrow, with doors marked in multiple languages. Nari found her room number and placed her palm on the scanner. The door slid open to reveal a small space with a bed, desk, and storage unit. Everything was made for beings much larger than humans. The bed was twice as wide as she needed, and the desk came up to her chest. "At least we have our own rooms," Ji-ho said from the doorway next to hers. He was holding his datapad and frowning. "Look at this class schedule. Combat training, tactical analysis, weapon systems, space navigation, 12 hours a day for the next year." "The combat training worries me," Byom said, joining them in the corridor. "How are we supposed to compete with beings twice our size and strength?" Sue looked up from his datapad. "The information says all cadets receive equal treatment regardless of species. Physical differences are accounted for in training programs." "Equal treatment," Rena said with doubt in her voice. "Did you see how they looked at us in the processing center?" "I do not think we will be treated equally." Nari studied her class schedule. The first session was combat training with Commander Vextar. According to the brief description, he was a decorated Vaxari officer with 40 years of military service. His specialty was Preparing inferior species for auxiliary combat roles. Inferior species, she read aloud. They do not even try to hide their prejudice. The orientation session was held in a massive auditorium. Thousands of seats rose in curved rows toward a domed ceiling. The 6 humans found seats near the back, feeling lost in the crowd of alien cadets. Most of the other beings were much larger, and their voices created a constant buzz of unfamiliar sounds. A holographic display activated at the front of the auditorium. The image showed a Vaxari officer in full military dress. His scales were polished to a mirror shine, and his uniform bore the insignia of a fleet admiral. "Welcome to the Galactic Defense Academy," the admiral began. His voice carried easily through the huge space. "You represent the finest young minds from across the galaxy. Here you will learn to serve the great civilizations that maintain peace and order among the stars." The presentation continued with images of famous battles and heroic officers. Every hero shown was either Vaxari, Nethek, or Plume. No other species appeared in the historical records. The message was clear about who belonged at the top of the galactic hierarchy. "Some of you come from lesser developed worlds," the admiral continued. "You may find the training challenging. Remember that your role is to support the natural leaders among us. Not every species is meant for command, but all can serve with honor in appropriate positions." Nari felt her jaw tighten. Around her, the other human cadets shifted uncomfortably in their seats. The words were diplomatic, but the meaning was obvious. They were being told their place before training even began. The orientation ended with room assignments for combat training groups. Nari found her name on the list for Group 7, along with 40 other cadets. Most of them were from species she did not recognize, but none were from the dominant 3 groups. It seemed the inferior species were being placed together. As the crowd dispersed, she overheard a conversation between 2 Vaxari cadets. "Look at those mammals," one said, pointing toward the humans. "I heard their planet barely has spaceflight. What are they doing here?" "Commander Vextar will sort them out," replied the other. "He has a talent for showing lesser beings their proper place. Give him a week and they will be begging to transfer to support roles." The Vaxari laughed and walked away, their scales glinting under the artificial lights. Nari watched them go, feeling a cold determination settle in her chest. She had come to the academy to learn and prove herself worthy of serving alongside the galaxy's best officers. But it was becoming clear that she would have to fight for that chance every step of the way. "Did you hear that?" Jiho asked quietly. "I heard," Nari replied. "They think we will break easily." "Will we?" Dana asked with concern in her voice. Nari looked at her fellow humans, then at the alien cadets filing out of the auditorium. Tomorrow would bring their first real test. Commander Vextar would try to break their spirits and force them into submission. But humans had faced impossible odds before and survived. They had crawled out of caves to reach the stars. They would not be broken by alien prejudice. "No," she said firmly. "We will not break. We will show them what humans are really made of." The combat training facility was enormous. The ceiling stretched up into darkness and the floor was covered with different training areas. Obstacle courses, fighting rings, weapons ranges, and simulation pods filled the space. The air hummed with energy weapons and the sounds of cadets pushing themselves to their limits. Commander Vextar stood at the center of it all like a dark tower. He was the largest Vaxari that Nari had ever seen, with scales so black they seemed to absorb light. His uniform was perfectly pressed and multiple weapons hung from his belt. When he moved, every other being in the facility took notice. "Group 7 form ranks," he commanded. His voice carried across the training floor without effort. The 40 cadets in Nari's group quickly arranged themselves in neat rows. The 6 humans found themselves placed in the back row, behind beings that were all taller and broader than they were. Vextar walked slowly along the front rank, examining each cadet with cold yellow eyes. When he spoke, his words were clipped and precise. "I am Commander Vextar. For the next year, your lives belong to me. I will push you beyond your limits. Some of you will break. Some of you will quit. Some of you will learn to serve properly." He paused and looked directly at the human section. "And some of you will discover that your species was never meant for military service." The first exercise was a basic obstacle course. Cadets had to climb walls, crawl through tunnels, jump across gaps, and navigate through laser barriers. It looked challenging but manageable. Nari watched as the first few cadets ran through it with varying degrees of success. "Mammals to the front," Vextar called out. Let us see what your primitive world taught you about physical fitness. The 6 humans moved to the starting line. Nari could feel every eye in the facility watching them. This was their first real test, and everyone wanted to see how the newcomers would perform. Begin, Vexitar said simply. Jiho went first. He was the fastest runner among them and made good time on the straight sections. But the walls were built for beings with longer arms and stronger grips. He struggled with the climbing sections and barely managed to pull himself over the highest barrier. Su attempted the course next. His approach was more methodical, studying each obstacle before attempting it. He found clever ways around some of the challenges, using momentum and technique instead of raw strength. His time was better than Jiho's, but still slower than most of the alien cadets. Rena and Dana ran the course together, helping each other over the difficult sections. This teamwork got them through faster than either could have managed alone, but Vextar seemed annoyed by their cooperation. Biom took a different approach entirely. Instead of fighting the obstacles, he analyzed them like engineering problems. He found the most efficient path through each section and executed it with precision. His time was actually competitive with some of the better alien performances. Finally, it was Nari's turn. She had been watching carefully, noting not just the obstacles but also how Vextar reacted to different approaches. She could see that he expected humans to fail, wanted them to fail, but she also noticed something else. The course was designed with specific weaknesses that could be exploited. She started running. At the first wall, instead of trying to climb straight up, she used a support beam to gain extra height. At the tunnel section, she rolled instead of crawling, moving faster through the confined space. At the laser barriers, she timed the patterns and moved with confidence instead of hesitation. Her final time was among the best of all 40 cadets. A few alien cadets actually applauded, but Vextar's expression remained unchanged. "Acceptable," he said coldly. "Now we move to the real test." The simulation chamber was a large room filled with holographic projectors. Cadets could be placed in any combat scenario, from space battles to ground assaults. The technology was so advanced that the simulations felt completely real. "Today's scenario," Vextar announced, "is a planetary assault. The enemy has fortified positions on high ground. Your mission is to take those positions with minimal casualties." The simulation loaded around them. They stood in a valley looking up at steep hills covered with enemy bunkers and weapon emplacements. Energy barriers protected the approaches, and automated defenses covered every possible attack route. Vextar assigned roles quickly. The 3 Vaxari cadets in the group were given command positions. They would coordinate the assault from a secure command post in the rear. The Nethek cadets were assigned to communications and intelligence gathering. The Plume cadets got technical support roles. The humans and other lesser species were designated as assault troops. Their job was to charge up the hills and take the enemy positions through direct frontal attack. Nari immediately saw the problem with this plan. "Commander," she said, raising her hand, "I have concerns about the tactical approach." Vextar turned his cold gaze on her. "Concerns, mammal, elaborate." "A frontal assault up those hills will result in massive casualties. The enemy has overlapping fields of fire and clear sight lines. There are alternative approaches that would be more effective, such as," Nari pointed to the tactical display, "there are 3 ravines that provide covered approaches to the flanks of the enemy positions. Small teams could use those to get behind the main defenses. Also, the enemy power grid shows vulnerabilities here and here. If we can disrupt their energy barriers, the main assault would have a much higher chance of success." The Vaxari cadet commanders looked annoyed. One of them, a female with silver scale patterns, spoke up. "The plan is sound. Frontal assault is the most direct approach. Lesser species should not question superior tactical thinking." Vextar nodded approvingly. "Cadet Zexara is correct. The direct approach builds character and tests resolve. Your concerns are noted and dismissed." The simulation began. Nari and her fellow assault troops started their advance up the steep hills. Just as she had predicted, the enemy defenses tore them apart. Energy blasts rained down from the bunkers above. Automated weapons tracked their movements and fired with deadly accuracy. Within minutes, half the assault force was eliminated. The simulation registered their deaths with realistic detail. Nari found herself pinned behind a small boulder, unable to advance or retreat. Around her, other cadets were being picked off one by one. In the command post, the Vaxari cadets argued among themselves. They had no backup plan, and no understanding of why their assault was failing. They kept ordering more frontal attacks, sending wave after wave of troops into the same killing fields. "Push harder," Sexara commanded through the communication system. "Victory requires sacrifice." Nari watched as more of her fellow cadets fell to enemy fire. The simulation was brutally realistic, and she could see the psychological impact it was having on everyone. This was supposed to be a learning exercise, but it was becoming a demonstration of failure. The exercise ended with complete tactical defeat. 80% casualties among the assault troops, no objectives taken, and the command team still arguing about whose fault it was. In a real battle, it would have been a disaster of historic proportions. "Simulation complete," Vextar announced. "Analysis will show that the failure was due to inadequate performance by assault troops. Lesser species lack the courage and skill necessary for military operations." Nari felt anger building in her chest. The failure had nothing to do with courage or skill. It was the result of arrogant commanders refusing to listen to better ideas. But she held her tongue and maintained military bearing. As the cadets filed out of the simulation chamber, Jiho moved close to her. "How long do we let this continue?" he whispered. Nari looked back at Commander Vextar, who was already setting up the next group for another doomed exercise. The system here was designed to crush spirits and enforce hierarchies, but humans had never been good at accepting unfair systems. "Until we can't," she whispered back. The question was how long that would be. 3 weeks had passed since the humans arrived at the academy. Each day brought new challenges and new humiliations. The pattern was always the same. The dominant species received command training and strategic education. Everyone else got assigned to support roles and dangerous missions. Li Su lay in the medical bay with his left arm in a healing chamber. The training accident had happened during weapons practice. A Vaxari cadet had claimed his energy rifle misfired, sending a blast that burned through Su's uniform and seared his flesh. The medical staff treated it as routine, just another lesson about being careful around superior technology. "It was not an accident," Su said quietly to Nari when she visited him. His face was pale from pain medication, but his eyes were sharp with anger. "Cadet Mortak aimed directly at me. I saw him smile before he fired." Nari believed him. She had been watching the systematic abuse grow worse each week. The alien instructors found countless ways to put human cadets in dangerous situations. Equipment failures, communication breakdowns, and tactical errors always seemed to affect the humans more than anyone else. Han Biom faced a disciplinary hearing that afternoon. His crime was correcting a Nethek instructor's mathematics during a navigation class. The crystalline beings prided themselves on computational accuracy, but Biom had found a significant error in their jump calculations. Instead of gratitude for preventing a potentially dangerous mistake, he received formal charges of insubordination. "The mathematics are correct," Biom had said during the class, "but the gravitational constant you are using is outdated. The newer measurements from the Kepler Observatory show a different value." Instructor Kethavel had shifted colors rapidly, displaying the Nethek equivalent of rage. "Primitive mammals do not question Nethek mathematics. Report to disciplinary processing immediately." Now Biom sat outside the hearing room waiting to learn his punishment. The charges could result in anything from extra duties to expulsion from the academy, all for being right about numbers. Nari found herself thinking about Earth more often. The planet seemed very far away now, not just in distance but in attitude. On Earth, being correct was generally considered a good thing. Here, being correct while belonging to the wrong species was a serious offense. The advanced tactics class met in a circular amphitheater with holographic displays surrounding the central speaking area. Today's topic was historical battles, with each cadet required to present analysis of a famous military engagement. The alien cadets had chosen victories by their own species, celebrating the tactical genius of their ancestors. When Nari's turn came, she walked to the center of the amphitheater with her data pad in hand. The holographic displays activated, showing star charts and ship movements around a system called Rigel 7. She had chosen this battle specifically because it challenged everything the Academy taught about proper military doctrine. The Battle of Rigel 7 took place 18 months ago, she began. A human colony fleet of 12 ships faced a pirate armada of 47 vessels. By all standard tactical analysis, the humans should have been destroyed. The displays showed the initial positions. The pirate fleet had superior numbers, better weapons, and favorable positioning near an asteroid field. The human ships were transports and light escorts, nothing that should have survived contact with a real military force. Vexari tactical doctrine would have recommended immediate retreat. Nari continued. Nethec calculations would have shown a success probability of less than 3%. Plume's strategy guidelines would have called for negotiation or surrender. A few alien cadets shifted uncomfortably. Those were indeed the standard responses their species would have chosen. Cut losses, minimize damage, accept defeat when faced with overwhelming odds. Instead, the human commander chose a different approach. The holographic display showed the human ships breaking formation and scattering in different directions. Rather than fighting as a unified fleet, they divided into small groups and used unconventional tactics. What followed was a masterpiece of creative thinking. The human ships used the asteroid field not as an obstacle but as a weapon, pushing large rocks into the paths of pursuing pirates. They sent false distress signals to confuse enemy coordination. They even rammed damaged transports into pirate vessels, trading ships they were going to lose anyway for strategic advantages. The result was a complete human victory, Nari said. All 47 pirate vessels were destroyed or captured. The human fleet suffered only 30% casualties, well within acceptable parameters for a defensive engagement. The amphitheater was completely silent. Every eye was focused on the tactical display, showing the final positions of the battle. Scattered wreckage of pirate ships floated among the asteroids while the surviving human vessels regrouped to continue their journey. The key factor, Nari continued, was adaptability. Human commanders did not follow established doctrine because established doctrine would have led to defeat. They created new tactics based on the specific situation they faced. She activated another display, showing 3 other recent battles. This same pattern appears in multiple engagements. The Battle of Wolf 359, where human forces defeated a superior Krikonian fleet through coordinated ramming attacks. The Defense of New Geneva, where colonists held off raiders by turning mining equipment into weapons. The Proxima Incident, where a single human destroyer crippled an entire syndicate battle group through creative use of their own tactics against them. The displays showed battle after battle, where humans had won through unconventional thinking. In each case, following standard galactic military doctrine would have led to disaster. Only by thinking differently had they achieved victory. These examples demonstrate a fundamental flaw in current tactical education, Nari said. We are taught that there is one correct way to fight, one proper response to each situation. But real warfare is unpredictable. Enemies do not always follow the same patterns. Sometimes the proper response is to do something that has never been done before. The silence in the amphitheater was absolute. Nari had not just presented a battle analysis. She had challenged the entire foundation of galactic military thinking. She had suggested that the dominant species might actually be wrong about how to fight wars. Commander Vexitar rose slowly from his seat. His black scales seemed to absorb the light from the holographic displays, making him appear like a shadow-given form. The energy weapon at his hip hummed with barely contained power. You forget your place, mammal, he said, his voice carrying clearly through the amphitheater. Every conversation stopped. Every eye turned toward this confrontation. Perhaps a reminder of hierarchy is required. Nari met his gaze steadily. She had known this moment would come eventually. The Academy was built on the assumption that some species were naturally superior to others. Her presentation had attacked that assumption with facts and evidence. Such challenges could not be tolerated. Around the amphitheater, alien cadets leaned forward in their seats. They had all heard stories about Commander Vextar's methods for dealing with insubordination. Some cadets had been sent home in medical transports. Others had simply disappeared, transferred to distant posts where their complaints would never be heard. My analysis stands on its own merits, Commander, Nari said quietly. The battle records are publicly available. The tactical innovations I described actually happened. Human forces achieved these victories through methods that contradict standard doctrine. Vextar's hand moved to his weapon. The gesture was slow and deliberate, designed to be seen by everyone present. This was not just about one human cadet questioning one instructor. This was about maintaining the natural order of species hierarchy. Facts can be interpreted many ways, Vextar replied. Your interpretation shows dangerous thinking. Primitive species often mistake luck for skill, chaos for strategy. Then explain the pattern, Nari challenged. Human forces have won 17 major engagements in the past 5 years, all against superior enemies. At what point does luck become something else? The question hung in the air like a challenge to everything the Academy represented. If humans could consistently defeat superior forces, what did that say about the nature of superiority itself? If primitive mammals could outfight advanced species, then maybe the hierarchy was built on false assumptions. Commander Vextar's scales darkened with rage. His weapon was now fully visible, energy crackling along its barrel. The message was clear to everyone present. This human had gone too far. The natural order would be restored through force if necessary. In her seat near the back, Yoon Rina tensed to intervene. Beside her, Park Jiho and Choi Dana prepared to stand with their fellow human. They might not be able to stop what was coming, but they would not let Nari face it alone. The moment stretched like a taut wire, ready to snap. Two ways of thinking about the universe faced each other in the center of the amphitheater, one built on ancient hierarchies and assumed superiority, the other based on evidence and the revolutionary idea that anyone could be wrong about anything. Commander Vextar took a step forward, his weapon rising. The confrontation was about to begin. Commander Vextar drew his energy weapon with practiced precision. The Vaxari military pistol was a work of art, its crystalline power core glowing with contained fury. Every cadet in the academy had seen demonstrations of its capabilities. The weapon could stun a target unconscious or burn through solid metal, depending on its settings. The holographic displays around the amphitheater cast shifting shadows as Vextar raised the weapon. His movements were slow and deliberate, designed to build fear and anticipation. This was not just about punishing one insubordinate cadet. This was theater, a performance meant to remind every lesser species of their proper place. "On your knees, human," Vextar commanded. His voice carried the weight of 40 years of military authority. The targeting laser painted a small red dot on Nari's chest right over her heart. "Apologize for your presumption, and perhaps your punishment will be merely educational." The amphitheater was completely silent. 300 cadets held their breath, waiting to see if the human would break. This was the moment when lesser species typically crumbled, when the reality of galactic hierarchy reasserted itself. Fear was supposed to win over defiance. Nari looked down at the red dot on her uniform, then back up at Vextar's cold yellow eyes. She could feel the tension in the air, the expectation that she would submit. Her fellow humans were ready to intervene, but she gave them the slightest shake of her head. This moment belonged to her alone. "My analysis stands on its own merits, Commander," she said calmly. Human tactical thinking saved lives that Vaxari doctrine would have sacrificed. That is not presumption, that is fact. A few alien cadets gasped at her continued defiance. No lesser species had ever maintained resistance in the face of drawn weapons. The natural order said that when superior beings showed force, inferior ones submitted. Yet this small mammal continued to stand straight and speak with confidence. Vexitar's scales rippled with barely controlled rage. His weapon arm trembled slightly, fighting the urge to fire immediately. But discipline held him back. The academy had rules, even for dealing with insubordination. A warning shot first, then escalation if necessary. "You test my patience, mammal," he hissed through clenched teeth. "Perhaps you do not understand the seriousness of your situation." The energy weapon's power core whined as it charged to full capacity. The sound was distinctive, recognizable to anyone with military training. It meant that lethal force was now available at the touch of a trigger. One squeeze would end this confrontation permanently. Nari felt her heart racing, but she kept her breathing steady. Fear was natural, even necessary. It kept you alive in dangerous situations. But fear could not be allowed to control your choices. She had spent her entire life refusing to let fear make her decisions. "I understand perfectly, Commander," she replied. "You have drawn a weapon on an unarmed cadet because she presented factual information that challenges your worldview. The seriousness of that action reflects on you, not me." The amphitheater erupted in whispered conversations. Alien cadets turned to each other, shocked by what they were witnessing. This was not how these confrontations were supposed to go. The human should have broken by now, should have begged for forgiveness and accepted her inferior status. Instead, she had turned the situation around. She was making the instructor's use of force look like weakness rather than strength. She was suggesting that drawing weapons on students was the action of someone who could not win arguments with facts. Vextar realized that his display of dominance was backfiring. The longer this continued, the more it looked like he was afraid of one small human's ideas. But he had drawn his weapon in front of the entire advanced tactics class. He could not simply put it away without appearing weak. "Final warning," he said, raising the weapon to aim directly at her face. "Submit now or face the consequences." The red targeting dot moved from Nari's chest to her forehead. At this range, even a stunning blast would likely cause permanent brain damage. A lethal setting would be instantly fatal. The threat could not be more clear. Nari took a small step forward, moving closer to the weapon rather than away from it. The action was so unexpected that several cadets actually stood up in their seats thinking she was about to attack the instructor. "I submit to facts and evidence, Commander," she said clearly. "I submit to logic and reason. I do not submit to intimidation." The words hung in the air like a declaration of war against everything the Academy represented. She was not just defying one instructor. She was rejecting the entire system that kept lesser species in subordinate roles through fear and force. Vextar's finger moved to the trigger. The weapon was aimed directly at her head from less than 3 meters away. At this distance, he literally could not miss. One small movement would end this confrontation and restore the natural order, but something made him hesitate. Perhaps it was the way she looked at him, not with fear but with calm evaluation. Perhaps it was the absolute silence in the amphitheater. Hundreds of beings watching to see what kind of leader he really was. Perhaps it was the growing realization that shooting an unarmed student might not send the message he intended. Instead, he shifted his aim slightly and pulled the trigger. The energy blast was brilliant white, bright enough to temporarily blind anyone looking directly at it. The sound was like thunder in the enclosed space echoing off the walls and ceiling. The smell of superheated metal filled the air as the energy beam struck the floor. The blast hit the ground inches from Nari's boots, leaving a smoking crater in the reinforced flooring. Molten metal dripped from the edges of the hole, glowing red-hot in the amphitheater's lighting. The warning could not have been more clear. Vextar lowered his weapon slightly, expecting to see terror in the human's eyes. This was the moment when reality set in, when the full implications of defying superior species became clear. The next shot would not miss. Instead, Nari looked down at the smoking crater, then back up at him. Her expression was thoughtful, almost curious. When she spoke, her voice carried clearly across the silent amphitheater. Was that meant to hit? The question was so unexpected that Vextar actually blinked in surprise. Of all the possible responses to a warning shot, that was not one he had ever heard before. It took him several seconds to process what she had asked. "What?" he said, momentarily losing his commanding tone. "Your shot," Nari repeated calmly. "It missed my feet by exactly 4.7 centimeters. Given Vexari's reputation for precision with energy weapons, that seems like a very deliberate miss. So I am asking if that shot was meant to hit me or meant to miss me." The amphitheater was completely silent. Every eye was focused on this impossible exchange between instructor and student. The human had just turned a warning, shot into a question about the instructor's intentions and abilities. Vextar felt something he had not experienced in decades: uncertainty. The shot had indeed been deliberately placed to miss. It was meant as intimidation, not injury, but admitting that would show weakness. Denying it would be a lie that everyone present would recognize. "You dare question Vexari marksmanship?" he said, trying to regain control of the situation. "I dare to recognize precision when I see it, Commander," Nari replied. "You placed that shot exactly where you intended it to go. The question is why you intended it to go there instead of here." She tapped her chest with one finger. The gesture was small but profound. She was pointing out that he had chosen not to shoot her, even though he clearly had the opportunity. She was suggesting that his restraint was more significant than his display of force. Around the amphitheater, alien cadets began to understand what was happening. The human was not cowering in fear. She was analyzing the situation like a tactical problem. She was treating the instructor's actions as data to be evaluated, rather than threats to be feared. Commander Vextar found himself in an impossible position. He could not shoot an unarmed student without justification, but he could not back down without appearing weak. The human had trapped him in a logical puzzle with no clear solution. His weapon remained raised, but the certainty was gone from his posture. For the first time in his career, he was not sure what to do next. The confrontation had reached a turning point, but neither side was willing to give ground. The question hung in the air like a challenge to the natural order itself. Commander Vextar's weapon arm trembled with barely contained rage, but something new had entered his yellow eyes. Uncertainty. No inferior species had ever responded to a warning shot with such casual analysis of his intentions. "You dare mock Vaxari precision?" he roared, but his voice carried a note that had not been there before. The absolute confidence was cracking. Every cadet in the amphitheater could hear it. Nari took another measured step forward, bringing herself even closer to the energy weapon. The action sent ripples of shock through the assembled students. Moving toward a drawn weapon was not the behavior of a frightened lesser species. It was the action of someone who had evaluated the threat and found it manageable. "I dare to recognize accuracy when I see it, Commander," she said calmly. "You placed that shot exactly where you intended it to go. Your reputation for precision is well deserved. The question is why you intended it there instead of here." She tapped her chest again with one finger, directly over her heart. The gesture was small but profound. She was pointing out that he had the skill to kill her but had chosen not to. She was suggesting that his restraint was more important than his display of force. The amphitheater erupted in whispered conversations as alien cadets turned to each other in amazement. This was not how confrontations with superior officers were supposed to go. Lesser species were meant to submit when faced with weapons and authority. They were not supposed to analyze the situation like a tactical exercise. Cadet Mortak, the Vaxari who had accidentally injured Li Su, stood up in his seat. "Commander, this human shows dangerous disrespect. Perhaps a more direct lesson is required." Several other dominant species cadets nodded in agreement. The natural hierarchy was being challenged in front of hundreds of witnesses. If this human was allowed to continue her defiance, it might inspire other lesser beings to question their proper places. But before Vextar could respond, something unexpected happened. Yunrina stood up slowly from her seat near the back of the amphitheater. Her movement was deliberate and visible to everyone present. She said nothing, just rose to her feet and looked steadily at the confrontation below. A few seconds later, Choi Dana stood as well. Then Park Jiho, then Han Beom, despite the disciplinary charges hanging over him. Finally, Li Su entered the amphitheater, his injured arm still in a medical support sleeve, and took a standing position near the entrance. The 6 humans presented a united front without words or dramatic gestures. They simply stood together, refusing to sit while one of their own faced weapons and threats. The message was clear to everyone present. These beings did not break individually, and they would not abandon each other. The sight sent murmurs through the alien cadets. Some species had cultural concepts of group loyalty, but this was different. These humans were not just supporting a member of their species. They were making a statement about their refusal to be intimidated. Commander Vextar found himself facing not one defiant human, but 6. His weapon was still aimed at Nari, but now he had to consider the implications of his actions. Shooting one insubordinate cadet might be justified as maintaining discipline, but the humans were not giving him the option of dealing with them separately. "Sit down," he commanded the standing humans. "This does not concern you." "Yes, it does," Jiho said quietly. His voice carried clearly through the amphitheater's acoustics. "When one of us is threatened for speaking facts, it concerns all of us. We stand together," Rena added. "That is what we do." Vextar realized that his situation had become significantly more complicated. The Academy had procedures for dealing with individual troublemakers, but 6 humans standing in unified defiance was something new. If he escalated the confrontation, he would be taking action against all of them. More importantly, their behavior was having an effect on the other cadets. Several non-dominant species had begun shifting in their seats, looking uncomfortable with the display of force against unarmed students. A few were whispering among themselves, and their conversations did not sound supportive of the instructor's actions. "Your species thinks it is special," Vextar said, trying to regain control of the narrative. "But you are still mammals from a primitive world. Your defiance changes nothing about your natural place in the hierarchy." "Our natural place," Nari said, her voice carrying clearly through the amphitheater, "is wherever our abilities and efforts can take us. We do not accept limitations based on the species we were born as. She gestured toward the holographic displays that still showed the human victories at Rigel 7 and other battles. These are not accidents or lucky breaks. They are the results of human beings refusing to accept that some problems cannot be solved. When Vaxari doctrine says retreat, we find another way. When Nethic mathematics says defeat is certain, we change the mathematics. When Plume strategy calls for surrender, we invent new strategies. The words hit the amphitheater like physical blows. She was not just defending her analysis anymore. She was articulating a completely different philosophy about the nature of species and capability. She was suggesting that the galactic hierarchy was not based on natural superiority but on limited thinking. Several alien cadets were now paying close attention to her words rather than focusing on the weapon pointed at her. The ideas she was expressing were dangerous to the established order, but they were also compelling. What if the lesser species were not actually lesser? What if they had simply been convinced to limit themselves? Commander Vextar saw his authority slipping away. The confrontation that was supposed to demonstrate his power was instead becoming a platform for revolutionary ideas. Every second that he hesitated gave more credibility to the human's position. But he also realized that shooting her now would make her a martyr. Her words had already been spoken. Her ideas were already spreading through the minds of impressionable young cadets. Killing her might silence her voice, but it would not kill her influence. "You test the patience of your betters," he said, but the words sounded hollow even to him. "I test nothing," Nari replied. "I present facts and analysis. If that threatens someone's position, perhaps their position was not as strong as they believed." The statement was like a sword thrust to the heart of everything the Academy represented. She was suggesting that authority based on species hierarchy was inherently weak. She was implying that true leadership came from competence and results rather than from accident of birth. Around the amphitheater, cadets from dozens of different species were reconsidering everything they had been taught about their places in the galactic order. The humans had not won this confrontation through force or superior technology. They had won it through courage and clarity of thought. Commander Vextar faced a choice that would define the rest of his career. He could escalate and potentially create martyrs. He could retreat and admit that his authority had limits. Or he could find a third option that preserved both his position and the Academy's reputation. The weapon in his hand felt heavier than it ever had before. The decision he made in the next few moments would echo through the Academy for years to come. In the charged silence, everyone waited to see what the next move would be. What happened next surprised everyone in the amphitheater, including Commander Vextar himself. Instead of firing again or escalating the confrontation, he slowly lowered his weapon. The movement was deliberate and visible to every cadet present. It was not surrender, but it was recognition of something he had never encountered before. The energy weapon powered down with a soft whine. The targeting laser disappeared, leaving only the normal lighting of the amphitheater. Vextar holstered the weapon with the same precise movements he used for everything, but his expression had changed. The cold certainty was gone, replaced by something that might have been curiosity. "Explain your tactical analysis of Rigel 7, he said finally. His voice was stripped of its earlier contempt. "Detail your conclusions." The request sent shockwaves through the assembled cadets. Commander Vextar was asking a human to continue the presentation that had started this confrontation. He was treating her ideas as worthy of consideration rather than dangerous insubordination. Nari felt the tension in her shoulders ease slightly, but she remained alert. This could still be a trap, a way to let her reveal more dangerous thinking before punishment. But she had come too far to retreat now. The other humans remained standing, showing their continued support. "The key insight," Nari began, reactivating the holographic displays, "is that conventional tactical doctrine assumes both sides will follow established patterns. When one side breaks those patterns, the other side often cannot adapt quickly enough to respond effectively." The battle display showed the moment when human ships scattered in all directions. Abandoning traditional formation flying, pirate commanders expected the human fleet to either retreat as a group or form defensive formations. They had never seen cargo ships used as kinetic weapons or mining charges repurposed as space mines. She highlighted specific moments in the battle where human creativity had overcome superior firepower. Here, Transport 7 used its cargo manipulator arms to grab an asteroid and launch it at pursuing fighters. Standard doctrine says cargo ships cannot engage military vessels, but nobody told the asteroid that it was impossible. A few alien cadets actually laughed at that observation. The idea of using physics itself as a weapon was not covered in any textbook they had studied. The pirates kept trying to apply conventional responses to unconventional attacks. Nari continued. They wasted time regrouping when they should have been adapting. They followed pursuit patterns that worked against normal military formations, but left them vulnerable to chaotic tactics. She brought up another display showing the final phase of the battle. By the time they realized they were fighting a completely different kind of enemy, it was too late. Half their fleet had been destroyed by tactics that should not have worked according to established military theory. Commander Vextar studied the tactical displays with professional interest. 40 years of military service had taught him to recognize genuine insight when he saw it. The human's analysis was not just correct, it was brilliant. She had identified patterns that had escaped the attention of senior strategic planners. Continue, he said simply. Nari activated displays showing 3 more human victories. The same principles apply to each engagement. At Wolf 359, human destroyers used ramming attacks because their weapons could not penetrate enemy shields. Conventional doctrine calls ramming a desperation tactic, but the humans planned it from the beginning. They built their attack strategy around what their enemies would consider impossible. The battle replays showed human ships accelerating directly toward much larger alien vessels. At the last moment, they would eject their crews in escape pods and let momentum carry empty ships into enemy hulls. The psychological impact on alien commanders was devastating. At New Geneva, colonial miners turned excavation equipment into siege weapons. They used industrial boring machines to punch holes in raider ships. They employed matter transporters designed for ore processing to teleport explosives directly into enemy engine rooms. The creativity was breathtaking. Humans had taken tools designed for peaceful purposes and transformed them into instruments of war. They had looked at every piece of equipment and asked not what it was designed to do, but what it could be made to do. The pattern is consistent across all engagements, Nari concluded. Human forces succeed by refusing to accept limitations. When conventional tactics fail, they invent new ones. When standard weapons are inadequate, they improvise alternatives. When retreat is the logical choice, they find ways to advance. The amphitheater was completely silent. Even the cadets from dominant species were listening intently to her analysis. The tactical innovations she described were genuinely impressive, regardless of which species had developed them. Commander Vextar walked slowly around the central display area, studying the battle data from different angles. His trained eye could see the brilliance in each tactical decision, even when those decisions violated everything he had been taught about proper military conduct. Your species thinks differently, he admitted finally. This much is obvious. The question is whether that difference has practical value in real military situations. The battle records speak for themselves, Commander, Nari replied. Human forces have achieved 17 major victories in 5 years, all against superior enemies. The casualties suffered were significantly lower than Vaxari projections suggested were possible. She activated one final display showing comparative casualty rates. Traditional galactic tactics prioritize minimizing equipment losses over personnel losses. Human tactics prioritize saving lives even if it means sacrificing ships and supplies. The results suggest that this approach may be more effective than conventional wisdom indicates. The numbers were undeniable. Human forces consistently achieved objectives with lower casualties than expected. Their willingness to sacrifice equipment to save lives had proven tactically sound as well as morally superior. Vextar stopped walking and faced Nari directly. Your analysis is thorough, and your conclusions are supported by evidence. This is the quality of thinking we attempt to develop in all our cadets. The words were simple, but their impact was enormous. A Vaxari commander had just acknowledged that a human cadet's work met academy standards. He had evaluated her ideas on their merits rather than dismissing them based on her species. However, he continued, the presentation of these ideas showed dangerous disrespect for established authority. Military effectiveness requires discipline and chain of command. Nari nodded respectfully. I understand, Commander, but I would suggest that true discipline comes from dedication to mission success rather than blind obedience to authority. If my analysis can save lives in future conflicts, then presenting it was my duty regardless of personal consequences. The statement was carefully crafted. She was acknowledging his criticism while defending her actions on military grounds. She was suggesting that challenging authority could itself be a form of military discipline. Commander Vextar considered this for a long moment. Around the amphitheater, hundreds of cadets waited to see how this unprecedented confrontation would end. The decisions made here would influence Academy policy for years to come. Your tactical analysis will be included in advanced strategy curriculum, he said finally. All cadets will study human innovations as examples of adaptive thinking under pressure. The announcement sent murmurs of amazement through the assembled students. Human tactics were going to be taught alongside Vexari doctrine and Nethec mathematics. The mammals from the edge worlds had earned a place in galactic military education. Furthermore, Vextar continued, Cadet Kim Nari will assist in developing new training scenarios that incorporate unconventional tactical approaches. The Academy benefits when all perspectives are considered. Nari felt a surge of triumph, but she kept her expression professional. This was more than she had dared hope for. Not only was she being vindicated, she was being given the opportunity to influence how future officers would be trained. The weeks that followed brought dramatic changes to the Academy. Human cadets found themselves consulted on tactical problems, rather than automatically assigned to support roles. Their unconventional solutions began appearing in strategy classes taught by instructors from all species. The systematic abuse did not end immediately. Centuries of hierarchy could not be overturned by single confrontations, but something fundamental had shifted. Cadets from lesser species began to speak up more often. Knowing that good ideas would be heard regardless of their source, Li Su's injury was officially investigated, leading to disciplinary action against Cadet Mortak. Han Biom's charges were dropped, and he was commended for his attention to mathematical accuracy. The message was clear that competence mattered more than species politics. Commander Vextar himself seemed changed by the experience. His training methods became more focused on developing individual capabilities rather than enforcing species hierarchies. He still maintained strict discipline, but it was discipline in service of military effectiveness rather than social control. In his final evaluation of Nari, he wrote words that would become famous throughout the Academy. Cadet Kim Nari demonstrates that true strength lies not in the power to intimidate, but in the refusal to be intimidated. Her species may lack our physical advantage,